Yeah, we are live. So, hello and welcome to today's session on LATOKEN VCTV. Today's session is all about Middle East, the rising opportunities. So, today we are going to talk about all the opportunities and the business arising from post-COVID world on the Middle East. So, today joining with me, the panel members are from Dubai and Delhi, from India and Dubai. So we joining with me is Janardhan Dalmia from Dubai and Ntasha from Delhi, India, from Venture Gurukul. So today we are going to talk about how the business started in Middle East and what was the current trend that happened in the Middle East and what is the post-COVID effects on the businesses and what are the new emerging markets in the Middle East region. So let's jump directly into the topic. Before that, we have a small introduction session of our panel members. JD, a small description about you and the kind of work that you have done so far.
Thanks for having me on the panel. My name is Janardhan Dalmia. I go by JD just to make it easier. Grew up in India. I run a business here in the UAE, which we started 3 years ago. It's by the name of TRUKKIN. We are a techno-logistic aggregator, where we connect the shippers with the transporters. Today, TRUKKIN is present in Saudi, in UAE. We have launched our business in Pakistan in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, and we serve almost 12 to 13 countries in the Middle Eastern region, including Pakistan. So thanks again for having me on the panel. Look forward to chatting more.
Thanks, JD. Natasha, a small description about you and the kind of work that you have done so far.
Thanks for having me, Amit. It's always been a pleasure to talk at VCTV panel discussions. To tell you a bit about Venture Gurukul, I co-founded Venture Gurukul almost 5 years back, and we have been doing a lot of proprietary investments in early stage ventures and tech startups in India, primarily at ventures which are digitally transforming large traditional industries through this tech platform, right? And aggregating or providing a tech-enabled solution for these sort of offline transactions through the online purview. And this trend has been accelerated with the pandemic, right? The next normal, right? Where we've seen large brands also come online in a massive way, and a lot of large industries grapple with their online strategies. So we're looking essentially for ventures which are looking for doing business as usual through the tech platform in the next normal. And when I talk about Venture Gurukul, we have recently launched our fund, which is a SEBI-registered Cat 1 fund, which, while it is focused on India, we are increasingly looking at opportunities from a growth stage perspective for a lot of these, I would say, a lot of Asian entrepreneurs to expand to the region, because there are a lot of geopolitical similarities between the consumers in both the region. And of course, with the accelerated trend which we are seeing in the Middle East, where as of last year, 1 billion of investments have been done in the VC domain, which has been huge for the region. Majority, of course, has been towards UAE, right, where there's been a huge surge of funding which has gone to a lot of startups. So we see a lot of accelerated trends in the region and a lot of things being picked up for something which has been here for around 3-4 years and have grown very well. So we see great opportunities for expansion in that region. And if you look at it, companies like Zomato and others have done very well in terms of growth stage expansion in that region. So that's a proven success story, and we believe in investing in such opportunities.
Great. Thanks, Natasha, for your description. So let's start with our show. Regarding Middle East, right? The Middle East started as an oil exporter. It has the largest oil reserves, in best oil reserves in the whole world. So how did and what kind of business emerged out of this oil export region, and what kind of money did all these businesses made out of this oil sector boom? So let's start with this. JD, what are your views on this?
So to answer your question, obviously, Middle East was historically known for its petrodollars, being Saudi Arabia and UAE as leading from the oil perspective, right? And Qatar also from the hydrocarbon perspective, etc. But if you see how the Middle East has evolved over the last 20 years, and more specifically when we talk about Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and the neighboring countries such as Qatar, etc., they have made a very clear and conscious decision to diversify away from being dependent heavily on the petrochemicals. And as such, Dubai was the first one to help open the economy with, creating the free zones, helping international companies come and set up their businesses, creating an environment which was ripe for trading opportunities, and really becoming sort of a hub to connect between the rest of the 6-hour radius countries, and connecting countries like India and China with the rest of the Middle East and North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. So, obviously, Dubai has shown and led the way in terms of showing how to diversify away from there. And today, the government, etc., here is focusing a lot on, bringing manufacturing. Obviously, there's a heavy tourism dependent economy, lifestyle living economy. So UAE has taken, major steps around it, and so Qatar has shown its own desire to create that sort of an economy. And now Saudi is the next big thing for the next 20 years in terms of how they have been opening up and liberalizing certain things inside the country. So I think there is a significant trend which has moved from petrochemicals to the rest of the contributors in an economy. And we operate in logistics, and you might be knowing Jebel Ali port is one of the biggest ports here in the UAE, which deals with millions and millions of containers on an annual basis. So all these things have been clearly setting the path for the next 50 years for the region.
Great. Thanks, JD. Moving over to Natasha, what are your views on the current trends in Dubai? Sorry, Middle East.
Yeah. So no, I think you're right to say Dubai because the majority of the funding in the region, as I mentioned to you, is being led by UAE at the moment, and I think there's been a lot of inflow from Saudi as well, right? And with the funding which you're seeing, it's a lot about with companies which are providing a tech platform for, let's say, lending, and the sort of rounds which are happening. Like it's because of the availability of capital in the region. That's humongous. So that itself shows the hello. Yeah, so that itself shows the commitment the government agencies have towards building a startup ecosystem in the region and ideally be the Silicon Valley in the region, right? So I would say this trend, uh, while they have been inspired by investing in some of the biggest funds like the SoftBank, which have traditionally looked at investing in tech companies, right? So now they're going more mainframe in terms of investing locally because they understand the value of the tech companies. And if you look at the US stock market, majority are all driven by the whole thing is being driven by the tech stocks, right? So that's where everyone is having their eye on the prize and building their own local ecosystem so that the economy as such grows with the tech transformation in the region. So that, from that perspective, you're seeing great investment, and that's very much in alignment with all the government agencies. And that's not just true for UAE. I can see that for Saudi and so many other regions picking up momentum on the same. And a lot of the startups, it's still say 1 billion is still small compared to let's say 50 billion over here in India or 100 billion or so in the US. So it's a long way to go. But I would say that there would be an accelerated trend, something which took us 2-3 years to reach, is being picked up almost immediately in the region in MENA because there's so many success stories to look at in these ecosystems in the US, in China, in India, right? And to be able to replicate the same with the tech transformation with these lot of these startups are providing. So I would say there's a lot of accelerated trends of platforms and various other aggregators, and it will not be long before with the sort of investments which is going in to have real solid tech talent in terms of AI and ML, which I would say is the next wave of a lot of startups, which should be coming about once a lot of platforms have been built, have been created. A lot of people are online and transacting on these huge platforms.
So, yep, Natasha, thanks for that. Moving on to the next question. Since COVID has created a massive lockdown in all over the world, The demand for oil has been dropped significantly for a short period of time, and now Tesla and other green energy platforms and green energy companies coming emerging, and they wanted to create EV industries on the rise, where electric vehicles are gaining a significant prominence over in a very short period of time. What kind of challenges, and how do Middle East will overcome these kind of challenges? Any insights on this? Let's start from JD.
Look, I think this is extremely hard to say how the governments react, but I think if you look at the generic trend, it's not more about being defensive. From what we have seen, governments are not taking a defensive approach in terms of that. Oh, the fuel, old petroleum based fuel vehicles need to survive. I think everyone can see and understand with the rise of Teslas of the world, and almost all the major car manufacturing companies. I think recently Volkswagen and had announced by 2025 they're going to go all electric vehicle. So there's a general trend where they all realize, whether you look at the light vehicle segment or the heavy vehicle segment, there is a trend where there is a clear efficiency in terms of going working with the whether it's a battery operated or some sort of a green energy vehicle. So governments are actually being supportive because they understand that one way or the other, this trend will continue to rise in the near term. But where I think governments can benefit from these rising trends are probably understanding and adapting to this incoming changes, and setting up or setting themselves up where they can contribute to the sector, right? Whereby diversifying from petroleum-based dollars to maybe, like, let's say, battery manufacturers, or electric vehicle manufacturing. I think recently in Saudi Arabia, I was reading Lucid Motors is setting up a plant there, which is a local-based, I think, EV manufacturer. So governments are not being defensive about this position. I think they are being very smart about it and trying to see that how best they can play a role in adapting to this new environment.
Great, JD. Natasha, what are your views on this trend?
I think when you talk about electric vehicle, a lot of it has got to do with the battery, the innovation around battery, and the innovation around the battery management solution, how effective the charge and discharge of the battery is, so that you have the optimum life cycle of a battery, right? And while I would say US and China have really pioneered the way in terms of a lot of innovation which has happened over there in terms of battery and battery technology. And even China, I think the surge which you're having in terms of EV usage is phenomenal, right? And they have actually built the infrastructure for it in a lot of places in terms of the charging station. So EV, yes, of course, one is of course the charging station and the ecosystem around it, which I understand in MENA is that sort of investment is being done by the government, right? In India, we still have to sort of reach to the stage where I would say the infrastructure for charging and charging stations has to be built, right? So there is some momentum, but it's slow. But I think there's a much larger push for the same in MENA. Now, like I was talking to you earlier about innovation, which needs to happen from the battery side of it. The pioneers, of course, have been US and China. To replicate the same, you just can't plug and play the same thing over here in let's say India or in MENA, right? Because the tropical climate is completely different. Like for a battery to sustain itself in the heat of 40, 50, right? You need some innovation from that front, right? So I think a lot of local IP needs to be built from that perspective for the region per se. While we have seen great successes of the same overseas, it will not just be a plug and play. And that's where I think the government should be looking at, or the institutional investors should be looking at, is to invest in IPs, local IPs, which are building which are building EV solutions for the region. Because even in India, like if you look at the grid system, how it works, how does the EV vehicle interact with the grid, right? Can the grid take such sort of a load? So it has to be a lot of things which have to be kept in mind, and I believe there's a huge opportunity for a local IP creation.
Great, thanks, Natasha. So Green energy is one part. The second part is the smart city solutions. I mean, Middle East is a perfect place for creating smart cities, where where you can plan cities accordingly, and you can do hyper connectivity in those areas. When we come to India, India is already has a great geographical location, and people here are already settled, and a lot of traditional business is happening. But these kind of challenges we don't face in Middle East. I mean, Middle East is already a well planned city. So how smart cities can play a major role, and what kind of businesses smart cities can make can arise out of Middle East regions. So JD, your views, please. Thank you.
Rightly said that in the Middle East, smart cities, you can relate more because I think Dubai, for example, again, we keep talking about Dubai or Abu Dhabi or one of the major destinations here which have been constructed or really taken over in the last 20-25 years. These are truly, what we describe as smart city or what we want to achieve as smart city. And Dubai is a great example of that, right? You have different areas, different pockets here, and they keep on, uh, you know, making new areas within Dubai itself, which you can call it as a community or a small, if we take a smart city and further break it down into a smart community, which is self-sustainable, which has all the things which are required for someone to be attracted and staying there and working there. And Dubai has set a great example around that. Whether I mean, today when you come to Middle East, you see a lot of greenery around it, right? And who would have imagined from the desert converting it into a huge green environment, increasing the number of beaches, etc. And I think these are all very well planned from the government here in terms of how do we do that. I mean, Masdar in Abu Dhabi is a great, sustainable city where they use solar power to generate the electricity and powering that up. So when we look at from all aspects, whether how to integrate digitization and technology throughout from day to day living of someone in the community, Dubai has been great in terms of integrating that. And I think so smart city is not just having an area or something, but I think where the things are working seamlessly, providing things in a much more user friendly manner and in a much more organized manner for the people who live in that community or in the city, is truly when you achieve. If you look at from the connectivity point of view, if you look at from the metro connectivity point of view, or the cycle tracks to energy to power to technology to smart police stations, I think UAE has really led from the front in terms of showing that how the cities should look like of the future. Yeah.
Thank you, JD, for that. Natasha, what are your insights on this, on smart cities, and how
See, I
is
can tell
it
you.
powering up?
Yeah, please,
Yep,
your
how
question.
is
How?
it comparable? Yes, the Middle Eastern scenario of smart cities, and how is India coping up with this smart city thing?
See, I can talk from smart city concept from let's say consumer side of it or from the venture capital side of it. How I look at it is there is a surge of lot of connected devices. You have intelligence being built in. You have Alexa, Amazon, which is all over. You have Google, which has their Echo, which is all over, right? And we are seeing a rise in these sort of products amongst users, right? In terms of we are even with the traditional system becoming smarter by the day with these sort of devices, with the connected devices they have, with the lighting solution, with the contactless door solution, which has been accelerated by the pandemic. So these are smart solutions. These talking devices are being integrated at the consumer side, though slowly and steadily. But I believe that this trend has to a certain extent been accelerated by the pandemic, where the concept of going touchless is picked up quite a bit. So as and when that sort of picks up, there's a huge opportunity on how these devices communicate with each other, and a lot of startup opportunities in terms of managing these connected devices. There are going to be so many connected devices which will be online, which are going to be connected through your Wi-Fi, barring your laptops or tablets, right? Which eventually makes living, I would say, smarter and sustainable and more optimum from an energy efficiency aspect. So I believe as and when technology surges and people adopt these sort of user behaviors, as and when the prices of these keeps coming down, like you get these sort of devices for almost nothing nowadays, and it has a continued pattern of coming down and down, right? There's going to be a huge adoption of the same at the consumer side. And and so there's a huge opportunity for the same in terms of being smart and sustainable at the consumer end. And we're hearing about literally going cordless, like possibly the next stage generation of people building their new houses will not have any wiring system because everything is just going to start connecting with the Wi-Fi. So these sort of things are happening at the consumer level by itself, and there's a lot of innovation which has been happening from startups in terms of offering these connected solutions which talk to these devices like Amazon Alexa and others. So I think it's really exciting times for startups.
Great. Thanks, Natasha, for those insightful views. Moving on to the next question. What is the ease of doing business in Dubai for startups? Per se, Middle East, sorry, not specifically Dubai, but Middle East. So different countries offer different kind of opportunities for the startups to get registered in that country. So what is the edge of Middle East over other region? What are the key uh, key edges or key advantages that Middle East holds over other parts of the world, where a startup can go and start their business from their country as a registered as a Middle East based company? So what kind of advantages do we hold? JD, uh, your points on this.
So look, there are multiple factors when you look at setting up a business here in the Middle East. Uh, First and foremost, the obvious is, people start in the Middle East because they see an opportunity in the market, addressable market in the region, in terms of uh, the young population, in terms of access to almost, when you think about, Middle East, you're not just thinking about UAE, you're thinking about UAE, Saudi, Bahrain, Qatar, the whole GCC plus the North Africa. So you look at Middle East as a broader combined, access to various countries. Now, there are some obvious reasons why one wants to set up here because of the access to, consumer market is there in Saudi and Egypt. There is industrialization which is happening here. Smartphone penetration or digitization is extremely high in the region overall. Specifically, now when you further break it down, where you look forward to setting up your business, right? And that comes down to the question of ease of doing the business, or ease of setting it up. Then again, it's a relative on us, when you compare UAE versus some of the other countries. UAE and more recently Saudi have all opened up or created certain platforms or free zones, etc., through which it's much more conducive for a startup to come and form a company or legally register themselves. Uh, but they're still, it's not as easy, I would say, from the startup perspective as India, for example, right? So the cost of failing in the Middle East is very high because everything is licensed, and each time someone comes to work, and it's a heavily 95% is expat oriented talent, right? So you have to hire, you have to sponsor the visa, and there are several costs of setting up a business. So the cost of failing is very high, which I personally would like to see go down. But yes, has there been a positive shift towards that? There has been, compared to 10 years ago, compared to 5 years ago. There is a clear goal, or there, governments are very vocal about supporting and promoting the startups. They have all understood that, the next wave of growth over the next 50 years, or maybe the next future unicorns are all going should be homegrown rather than imported. So when government are looking to diversify from their old school petrodollar economy to the new age, tech-driven economy, Governments are consciously trying to create that environment where startups can come and form the companies. Saudi has shown another great country where it's been inviting and helping up open up. But still, it's still challenging when we compare it to some of the other countries such as US or India, other places. The cost of hiring, cost of running, setting up a business, the cost of failure is very high, right? So that's my view on setting up a business here.
Interesting, JD. Thanks for that. Moving over to Natasha, what do you think of ease of doing business in the Middle East, and what are the tax benefits, if there are any, can be availed by the startups?
I think the tax benefit is quite obvious for Dubai, and everyone knows it's like a tax. It's a zero tax country as such in terms of personal or corporate tax. So that's one of the selling points which everyone is lured into to set up in these regions. But yeah, I do tend to agree that yeah, the cost of establishing something or the cost of really starting up in the region, in terms of the compliances which have to be done, the mandatory requirements which are required, makes it a little bit, I would say, capital intensive for, I would say, startups. So, but at the same time, I believe that there's dearth of capital available in the region. So there should be ample opportunities for these entrepreneurs initially to, yes, bet on themselves and with some traction, be able to get the right set of investors to help them take the long mile, extra long mile. So, so I think it's pretty obvious in terms of the taxation benefit in the region per se. What's changed? The momentum has changed in terms of the emphasis which is being laid on startups, and funding these sort of startups has made it very lucrative for some of the ventures to be based out of there and capture that market. It's though there's huge potential penetration of smartphones and internet in the region. I would say the penetration of startups or like transacting users on this is still limited, right? So that adoption still has to happen, and it's a lucrative large market, and the GDP per capita in the region is phenomenal, which makes it very exciting for some of the startups to offer something at a premium to the users in that region. So it's a little tough in terms of the cost of setting up the compliances and everything, but at the same time, I believe there's a huge amount of opportunity as well.
Great, thanks, Natasha, for that. Moving on to the tourism sector. Tourism is also another big industry nowadays. So what has post-COVID world witnessed in Middle East, and how AR, VR, augmented reality or virtual reality, kind of these technologies will play a role in the tourism sector? JD, let's start with you.
I think, look, it's too early to say the post-pandemic world of tourism. Although Dubai has obviously led and opened up the travel from around New Year's time. So I think it's still too early to say that we are already completely in the post-pandemic tourism environment. UAE was a very high tourism based economy, very high tourist attractive destination. And I think, yes, on a relative scale, today also it's one of the more sought after or preferred destinations because things are open with control and people following proper guidelines. So, as soon as the vaccinations and UAE has again showed very great leadership in terms of vaccinating its people at a very lightning speed, where more than almost 50-60% people have been vaccinated. So when you look at tourism-based economy, yes, it's going to bounce back very quickly. I don't have any views, to be very honest, around augmented reality in this space at the moment. But there is a clear push towards making sure or ensuring that the tourism in the region remains open and it's done in a very controlled and curated fashion. Saudi is another country, I keep on talking about it, which has been focusing a lot on opening of its country to finally to tourism. I mean, if you think about it, in Saudi, where Mecca is located, there's a huge amount of captive population which moves through that country on an annual basis. So up till now, it was purely from the religious perspective. But what if a certain percentage of population, even if you can create something for them, which is why they're creating, the cities like Neom City and opening other things in Saudi. If that captive population stays within the country for a few extra days and spends in the, country in various ways, I mean, that can be a massive, massive booster to the, regional economy. 2022 Qatar World Cup, which is supposed to happen, or the Expo, which is supposed to happen in Dubai later this year. I mean, all these things are going to create massive impact on tourism and inflow and outflow of people from the region, and will help not only one country, but it'll help pretty much all the neighboring countries in the region.
Thanks, JD. We will talk about Project Neom in the next few minutes. I am really interested. I hope our audience will also be interested on Project Neom, the 170-kilometer line city. So, yep. Moving on to Ntasha, what do you think the tourism sector will be in the coming days of the post-COVID world?
So it's hard to say how will it be a V-shape or a U-shape recovery is the most contested and heated debate about how things will start shaping up in the post-pandemic world. So I would not like to comment on how things will shape up from that aspect. But picking on tourism, I think while a lot of big events like the shopping festival and others have been impacted from a physical standpoint, and which has impacted tourism, there's a lot of opportunity for local startups to be able to capture on this market in terms of providing a tech platform, let's say from an expo standpoint, for a lot of B2B players to interact amongst themselves with the region, to hold like a virtual fashion show, a virtual expo using augmented reality, or have a 3D booth, to be able to get a look and feel of things. So there's huge amount of innovation. While I would say a lot of physical things have, with an obvious impact, been affected, but at the same time, there's huge opportunity on the digital standpoint to conduct these things online, and provides a lot of opportunity for startups to work on these genuine problems with the current situation, right? Even if you would want to do an event, it's not going to be the same force as it would have prior to COVID, right? So so there's a lot of opportunity for startups to work on this and be able to offer innovative solutions in different industries, may it be fashion, may it be retail, even from the games perspective, right? The World Cup, which is scheduled to happen, or any of the games, right? So we've seen a huge amount of these happen virtually, where fans have actually put their placards in the stadium where they have not been able to attend, and in some cases they have been able to get a virtual 3D view of what it is like to be at the stadium. So there's huge opportunity from an experiential standpoint for startups which are working on, I would say, like AR, VR, to be able to offer the same experience in the tech ecosystem. So I think while the physical things have been impacted, but I would say from a startup aspect, there's an opportunity to provide the same.
Yes, thanks, Natasha. Moving on to JD. JD, you talked about Project Neom. So please let us know more about Project Neom. Like, when did it start? How did it start? And why did it start? And what kind of impact is it going to have? What are the future plans? Anything as such?
Sure. So again, I think, look, I can only talk very briefly about Neo. A lot of it is there in the public domain, and just picking on those only. My views. Look, Saudi has an immense landmass and a very, a very, empty space which was being underutilized. Let's say, let's think from that perspective. And there was a huge amount of outflow of, dollars, right? People from Saudi who wanted to take a vacation, who would go out. And then the other aspect is there was a captive audience of people who want to, come to Mecca for pilgrimage, or, Hajj, or Umrah throughout, on an annual basis. So why was, so the country thought, why don't we look into capitalizing that, right? Or monetizing that in certain way as well. And UAE has clearly shown you build and they come sort of attitude, right? So Saudi has taken that opportunity in creating or working on creating a massive area, which is what they call NEOM, which is bigger than the size of UAE or Dubai, with having access to pretty much everything: tourism, work, great water places such as Maldives, which could probably rival place like Maldives. So I think if they create that, I'm sure it's gonna, and the strategic location, right? It's located on the northwestern part of the country, which is very close to Egypt and other neighboring countries. So not only GCC, but the rest of the North Africa as well. So creating that, and where it's located strategically, I think it would, once it's ready, it's going to create a massive economic impact, not only for Saudi, but for a lot of the neighboring countries. And it will also become like a go-to destination for people with from 8 to 10 hour radius in the region, which pretty much means all the way from South Africa to Turkey, in the north. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for that, JD. Now moving on to the agriculture sector of the Middle East. As we know that it is a lot, Middle East is covered with a lot of, the climate conditions of Middle East is not so friendly in terms of crops. So, but hydroponics and aeroponics and other technology enabled farming solutions are booming up, which is helping UAE and others Middle Eastern countries to actually start growing their own crops. So, what kind of investment scenario do we look at in terms of import export of all this agriculture? Natasha, over to you.
So, what do you want to understand about this? I know there's been a huge focus on it from a hydroponics, aeroponics perspective, a trend which has been emphasized even more so from a food security standpoint, something when the supply chains were disrupted in the during the pandemic, right? So, the region has realized the importance of it, and you're seeing massive amount of investment go in ag tech, agri tech ventures, which are capable of producing food in some of the most arid desert-like conditions, right? Using hydroponics and aeroponics and bringing some IoT into it to make it more effective and seamless. While hydroponics, aeroponics has seen innovation happen, like moving beyond growing leafy vegetables to some actual vegetables, barring tomato, of course, right? There's huge amount of opportunity and innovation which is still required for the region, and you're seeing the right amount of investment go into it. And I should really applaud the government agencies to recognize the need and emphasis for it. And barring this hydroponic, aeroponic, that's about growing it locally, right? To invest in the right sort of platforms, like I could give the example of Fresh to Home, which is a marketplace for uh, fresh meat and meat products, fishes, everything, right? Which is available on the platform. For them to for the government agency, for the institutional investor in Abu Dhabi to invest in a venture like that, so that there's more security around the supply of the same, which comes from the local markets over here in India and are ripe from an export perspective. So I would say food security not just from growing there, but even food security in terms of securing our sources from where it has to come from. So one is that, and there's and it's I think it's really interesting with the sort of investment which they're doing, which has been emphasized with the pandemic. So I would just not say hydroponics, aeroponics, but even get the distribution of it from different supply chain in place from different major exporting countries like India for one, and then you have Southeast Asia, the other, which is really exciting. And barring that, even something like smart proteins, like which has really picked up momentum, lab grown meat, right, which has picked up momentum in the West and is picking up momentum over there in the region as well. Yes, one of course is from the environmental friendly aspect of it, but yes, of course, the other aspect is food security, right? Which has been a growing trend elsewhere and is being emphasized and invested in the region very well.
Great. Thanks, Natasha, for the insightful points. Moving on to the final wrap up question. The kind of investment you have made or looking forward to make if something emerges out of Middle East, what is that exciting opportunities are you looking for? JD, any such opportunities that you are looking for?
The question is directed to me or Ntasha? I
Yeah,
couldn't.
JD, JD, to you.
See, I'm running a business, right? So we are in the process of raising capital rather than investing. So I think this question is probably more geared to Natasha, but then happy to add what I see trend here. Natasha, would you like to take a stab on it?
Yeah.
Yes,
No,
Natasha, please add to
no,
this.
no. I think like I was rightfully mentioning about this huge. While there's a huge amount of penetration of smartphone and internet in the region, the transaction is still not there yet, right? It needs to pick up momentum around the same, and it's still a growing ecosystem. So there are a lot of successes of a lot of ventures which have built platforms in various industries across the world, right? For the same to be emulated in the region, but I would say inspired, because you still have to build for the region, right? When you're talking about Middle East, you're just not talking about, let's say, one country like UAE. You're talking about all the GCC countries. That even includes Egypt, which is a big market with 100 million users sitting right there. So how do you build for the region, localize for the region, and that's where the huge amount of opportunity lies. And I feel that the entrepreneurs in the region have really got onto it. The funding stream which I'm seeing of people which are providing fintech, financial services for not just the consumers but even the SMEs, uh, a lot of them have successes elsewhere, and that's really picking up in a major way in the region. Like fintechs, I would say in the region have to be like they have a great appeal if they're Sharia compliant. So these sort of tools have to be added to be more localized for the region, which we are seeing. So exciting times.
Yeah, thanks, Natasha. Thanks, Natasha, for those insightful points. We are moving to the end of the session today, but before we end the session, any closing remarks from JD or Natasha on this?
So, Michael, I think thanks for firstly having me on the panel again. As the topic is on these rising opportunities. Me as a running a business or startup here last few years, and spending another 10 years before that working in banking, I think this is truly a great destination, and I'm very bullish about Middle East. Hence, why I have started the business here. So I think it's a very aligned perspective for me. I think to concur on what Natasha mentioned towards the last question. When you look at Middle East, it's not only looking about one country. It's you're looking at multiple countries together. So where it needs a different level of execution capability for an entrepreneur to go and not just launch a business in Dubai, but actually show the ability to scale, right? Being able to operate. So and this is where we also feel very proud about what we have achieved in last year. That not only we are present in one country, we serve 12 countries. There are even though the neighboring countries are almost just like neighboring states, if you were to relate with India, but each one has their own currency, own travel restrictions, own basically government, right? So one has to really one has to really set up in each one of them, navigate through various challenges. But at the end of the day, the pool of whether you look at the consumer market or the industrial market, it's not just one country that you're looking at. You're looking at a combination of 12, 13, 14 countries, and pretty much the gateway to the rest of the Africa as well. So I'm very bullish about the Middle East in general. The government's vision, the support, etc. And yeah, I think that's what I would like to highlight.
Thanks, JD. Natasha, any closing remarks per se from your side?
No, I think it was interesting panel discussion. It was great to be part of it and share some insights on MENA, get some insights on what's happening in the region as well from a different perspective. So it's just truly holistic from a discussion standpoint. And thank you, VCTV, for organizing this.
Thank you, VCTV, for organizing such kind of shows every day. JD and Natasha will be meeting again and again on this VCTV panel where we'll be discussing more on other topics as well. So thank you for today coming and sharing such insightful points on MENA region. So yes, we have come to the end of the show. Next time, next show and another topic. Until then, bye bye.
Take care.